All right, Anthony Richardson, after a 10 of 34 showing over the weekend.
They rung him up.
Benched. Taps himself out, and then they tap him out yet again.
See what you did there.
Double tap.
Hey, coach.
But it brings up a bigger point of developing young quarterbacks and what the right path is, because he's only started 10 games in the NFL. And when they drafted him, they knew he had one season of starting experience under his belt at Florida. They knew it was going to be a multi-year process. Everyone's making the comps to guys like Josh Allen and what the Bills had to suffer through for a couple years before the light switch proverbially flipped on with him. But to me, in this benching, it is, and Mitchell Schwartz had a great thread about this. I'm going to actually read one of his tweets verbatim here. He said, you think maybe, just maybe, there's something more to this than a few bad QB plays, and that it's not stat line related. That the team that talked about patience and going through the bumps with the young QBs didn't just forget about their developmental plan, because that's what they said when they drafted him. They said they knew it was going to be long-term. But to me, this is part of a developmental plan, because when a guy takes himself out of the game, and I think Mitchell Schwartz hit the nail on the head here, there is something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about in terms of what he's doing and how he's handling his business day to day. That when his offensive lineman, Ryan Kelly's willing to like call him out for that after the game, when like,
I didn't see what Ryan Kelly said. What did he say?
He just basically said, like, we're going to have a conversation about things like that. That's like, can't do that, basically.
Essentially what we said.
Yeah. And it's like, usually they're as protective as can be of their guy in situations, any adverse situations that go on in the NFL. So to me, this is like there were things going on that they were just not happy with. And that's, you see him on Sundays. His play was bad. Objectively, no one's going to defend what he was doing, especially from an accuracy perspective. But that the best course of action at this time was to say, hey, you got to get everything else in order before we let you see the football field again. You have to get your house in order, because the way he was preparing, it wasn't going to get him in a spot to develop on Sundays, because you just look at his tape. The same guy we saw weeks 1, 2, 3 last year, the same guy we're seeing now. There's like objective difference in anything, any aspect to his game. And frankly, he's getting worse. Like, frankly, his accuracy and things look worse this year than they even did last year. So I agree with this move personally. I do think that this can be a good thing if utilized and the messaging is correct in the locker room.
People think that this essentially is the Indianapolis Colts saying, we're done with him. But I don't believe that is not the case at all. Yes. This is what young quarterback development looks like when things go awry. And at times, it's not always going to be going as swimmingly as Jaden Daniels or a guy like Caleb Williams. There are going to be projects in the NFL like this guy, Anthony Richardson. Yes, he's got the physical tools, and we've all fallen in love with the things he can do with his body and his arm strength and his toughness. But at the end of the day, this game is a lot more than that. So I think this harbors an opportunity for Anthony Richardson to be able to go into practice, treat every practice like a game, get to see that Colts defense every single day with the scout team reps and take it seriously. I'm not in the building. To your point, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I'll tell you this, you show up today or you show up at your first day of practice as the backup and you say, I'm going to wear this defense out every single day. You got to take it as a challenge. I never was in a position where I got demoted to second string in the middle of the season or anything like that. But I've definitely been in a spot where I feel challenged by a coaching staff, and we can all relate to that. For Anthony Richardson, take this opportunity and use it as fuel. And for the Colts, take these reps that don't have a score to them, they're not a game, and make them game-like for Anthony Richardson. 100%. You can use this season as an off season for him. Joe Flacco's not going to play forever. Okay, the guy's got to go home eventually. So this is the Colts. This is punting down the field, and all the while Anthony Richardson will be getting better.
And here's the thing: they have an awesome situation right now. Like from a developmental perspective, you can't ask for much more than what they've done at the wide receiver position, at the offensive line position, and at running back. Like, it's all there for him to succeed. Yeah. So when you're comparing him to early career Josh Allen, who had similar numbers but wasn't benched, it's like Josh Allen was thrown to Zay Jones and Kelvin Benjamin. Like, we got to keep things into perspective.
Kelvin Benjamin, who is 300 pounds.
Yes, and not even just like prime Kelvin Benjamin, like endo career Kelvin Benjamin.
Too.
And Cole Beasley a year too. John Brown, but like his early starts were in a objectively it was complete opposite end of the spectrum in terms of what.
Yeah, but the numbers, Mike. But the numbers tell you he's better than Josh Allen was.
So with Richardson, when you're completing 44% of his passes, it's not because guys aren't open. It's because he's legitimately missing like half of his passes. It's a completely different conversation that we're having here. And again, people used to bench quarterbacks all the time. This was not an uncommon thing. And if benching you as a quarterback ruins your career, if that's what ruins your confidence, you weren't going to be the guy in.
Well, it's funny, right? Because we're having this discussion, agreeing with a lot of what you guys are saying. But now I'm trying to go back into my memory bank. And when was most recently a time a quarterback got benched in the middle of the season? Rookie quarterback.
Yeah.
Not rookie quarterback, but it was rookie
developmental,
developmental quarterback. And then actually came back and developed to be a guy.
Not in my football analyzing.
Not off the tip of my tongue.
So at first I was like, this isn't the end of him.
But how many of those guys are Anthony Richardson?
I mean,
from a skill set standpoint.
They said Jamarcus Russell's arm was stronger than everybody's. You know what I'm saying?
And he was an outlier, and now we're getting into that real estate.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So is Anthony Richardson in that same category?
Yeah.
So it's just like, to your point, right? Josh Allen went through some.
It's also because when you get benched, like things are going really bad. Like now,
100%. Well, I mean, but what we just talked about it, right? Things are going really bad for Josh Allen, and they knew again he was a developmental guy. We got to go through some of these ugly spouts with him, just because we feel like eventually he's going to get over the top. Right now, it took them getting him a true number one receiver to do that, right?
Yeah.
But I just go back and I think I'm like, when's the last time a guy got benched? They didn't let him like develop through the ugliness, and that he came back after being benched and became a guy.
I don't know. And I mean, I remember guys at other positions that we had drafted relatively highly that were physical specimen, but they just couldn't figure out how to play the game of football. And you sit them down early and hopefully they can learn from the vet that's not as talented, but it's just a better football player. And it never pans out. Next thing you know, Johnny's out of the building and you're on to the next draft pick.
So at first I was, again, with you guys. But again, now that I'm going down my memory bank, we're big proponents of, in the NFL, we've had to see it before. Right. And I don't think we've seen a scenario in recent memory where a guy does get benched and he comes back. I mean, people were saying the same thing with Bryce Young. He got benched. They'll eventually go back to him. Again, he's in a totally different scenario. To your point, Mike, Anthony Richardson has a way better setup than Bryce Young does in Carolina, right? As far as the offensive line, the running back, the skill position players, and he's got Shane Steichen.
Yeah, the coach.
Right? Like the coach alone, right, should give you an opportunity. Case in point, Gardner Minshew had them one game away from winning the AFC South last year. So when you look at it, like I hate to be premature, but could this be the end for Anthony Richardson, even though he's only played 10 games? Because what happens if Joe Flacco goes out there and pulls a Gardner Minshew and leads them to the playoffs?
Yep, because they're not too far out of it.
This is a guy that's 40 years old, essentially, right? And he leads them to the playoffs. Then it doesn't look good on Anthony Richardson. And again, he's a developmental guy. You knew there were going to be a lot of ups and downs when it comes to him. But to Mike's point, for them to be willing to pull him this early after only 10 starts has to be something more in regards to his preparation. And case in point, I don't understand how he had the gall to say something like that when a reporter asked him what happened on that play. Like, I'm not a big proponent of lying. That was the perfect example of lying. Like just saying, you could have just said I was banged up for a second. Yeah. They wanted to check me out, and then I went back into the game. For you to say I did a lot of running around and I'm tired, when you look at guys like this in the huddle who are laying it on the line every single play, and they don't get to come off the field, how do you think that makes them feel?
Because it was Quentin Nelson was the first guy on the scene of the crime when Anthony Richardson went down and got back up. Quentin Nelson runs over after finishing blocking for like the 60th time in the game, by the way, without coming off the field. Goes over there, checks on his guy.
His guy's good.
And then he goes to go back. And then next thing you know, Anthony Richardson doesn't return. So it's like, man, oh man, how do you expect your guys to follow when you're not leading?
I always say this. A head coach always has the pulse of the team. Case in point, Mike Tomlin. Like that was a big decision to insert Russell Wilson as head coach. And only a few coaches probably can make that decision, right? Mike Tomlin has a lot of trust from his team. And he actually knew the pulse of the locker room. And he felt like we could just get a little bit better at quarterback. and it's paying out for them, right?
Yeah.
But if it went left, people would have been questioning Mike Tomlin. Like, so for Shane Steichen, and obviously he had to get the okay from the people in the front office, right, to do a move like this, especially when you take a guy in the top 5 as a top 5 pick. There had to be something there, to Mike's point, where he was either not preparing right. And again, I don't want to put words into what could potentially be happening, but for you to feel comfortable
because we're not
enough,
there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For you to feel comfortable enough to bench a guy after only 10 starts says a lot about what Anthony Richardson is doing or not doing inside that building.
Because at quarterback, it's not only about skill development. There's like a maturity development, or that's any position.
Leadership development.
Yeah, but especially quarterback, because you are the guy. You are the guy that everyone looks to. And so when you're the guy that everyone looks to, and year 2 in your career, you're thinking it's all right to just take a play off. That's like,
I'm dignified by saying it too, which is insane.
I'm on Netflix last night watching this thing called The Comeback, and it was about the ALCS from 2003 and 2004 with the Yankees and the Red Sox. And one of the guys that kept getting interviewed was Pedro Martinez, and Pedro Martinez was the horse for the Boston Red Sox, and they rode him all the way to the end. And one thing he talked about was, when you are the leader, when you are the alpha, you have to show your guys that you're about business.
I love that.
And you're not taking any days off. You're not taking any pitches off. And I think a guy like Anthony Richardson, or any young player who wants to be a leader and respected by his men, can take a page out of Pedro's book, have an understanding that you are the alpha, and your behaviors, your actions, they have a lot of weight to them.
Case in point, there's a quarterback in Washington whose ribs are messed up.
Perfect example.
Didn't even practice most of the week. Practiced a little bit on Friday. But he knew his guys were laying on the line. Plus, he knew there was a guy on the other side that got drafted in front of him.
Yep.
So there's a competitive fire or juice that
I just got
alpha dogs have. Jaden Daniels went out there and played like nothing was wrong with him. Matter of fact, you didn't see any effects of him having a rib injury until he took that shot in the fourth quarter.
He hit him right in the ribs.
Exactly. So, like, they literally slid protected because they showed pressure. They got it wrong. The end was literally scot-free. Jacob Martin hit him right up under the ribs. Just for that one play, he was like, rest of the game, you didn't see him wince or anything. Matter of fact, still had the competitive fire to throw it 65 yards in the air to give them a chance to win the game. So, like, when you talk about guys that are willing to fight for their quarterback, who is the leader on the team, you hear how these guys talk about Jaden Daniels. Man, 5 is just different.
They would kill for Jaden Daniels.
Foxhole guy.
Yes.
They're going to foxhole for him.
Yes.
Like Anthony Richardson.
It's the Mahomes effect.
Correct. You're the leader of this team. You can't take any plays off. I don't care how tired you are. The only thing you could have did was like, hey, can we just get a run play next play?
Yeah.
I just need a play.
Let's run stretch.
Exactly. Let me just hand it off just so I can catch my breath. But for you to have the gall to go to the sideline when 10 other men are looking you in the face and they're not coming off on the field, there is no excuse for that.
Oh.
Do we think, we'll end it with this, do we think this and the Anthony Richardson saga will have knock-on effects to college, where guys deciding who, if maybe they're like 1-year starters, like in the Zach Wilson mold or the Anthony Richardson mold, where they're like obvious projects, but they're projected top 5 because they have these tools? Do we think we'll see those guys stay in college longer? Do we think we'll see NFL teams be less willing to take chances on them? Or do we think there's just going to be no really ramifications? This kind of,
I think every single one of these guys think that they are the next guy that could be a star. I think that these pro teams are going to start taking into account the fact that the project will be on their hands.
I don't think anything changes.
Nothing changes.
Because what people don't understand is front office guys, coaches, people will say players have egos. They have more egos than players, right? They feel like, I can be the guy to change this guy around. Like, I can develop this guy. And the crazy thing is, we always talk about this. Instead of trying to be the guy of the one-off guy, right? Go with the consistent guy, right? The guy that we've seen do it before. No, everybody wants to be the one-off guy. Like, they changed Josh Allen. We could do it too. No, you can't. Like, that's not the rule. That's the exception. Yep. You need to be the rule and not the exception. So, honestly, Mike, I don't think anything changes because I think people in the front office have just as big an ego, if not more, than players.
But I think the people in the front office are more afraid to have those egos shattered. So when they think about the investments that they're going to be making or the make or break deals that they're going to be getting involved in, as it pertains particularly to the quarterback position, you're going to see them be more cautious, I think, and go for these guys that are more pro-ready as opposed to, oh, my God, what could this guy become?
I think you could see a lean that way because it's not just Richardson. I mean, we saw with Trey Lance, too.
Yeah.
Very notably, where it's just like this guy, pure project, and then just couldn't even see a football field.
But then Malik Willis doesn't stop winning.
Yeah, so
what the hell are we doing out here?
But then they said he essentially was a project too.
But then Malik Willis was probably drafted where you would want to draft.
I don't think the thing is, this is why development.
Was he second round?
Third round. Development and coaching matters so much, right? Because it's all about where you go. And we saw Malik Willis kind of change this year with a new staff and Brian Callahan come in. And I know Pete Prisco went down there and spent some time in Nashville. He said he was like a totally different quarterback. And obviously, shout out to GM Brian Gutekunst because he saw something in training camp and throughout preseason that says, hey, that guy's different. And if anything hopefully happens to Jordan Love, which case in point, it did this year.
Win.
We need to go get him right now. I know a lot of people were surprised by that trade, but that literally right now looks like one of the best trades ever for this past season.
All right.
That's a good talk. That was a good talk.
That was a really good.
I will also say, I don't think it's going to impact college guys wanting to declare because Richardson got $34 million at the bank.
That's my point. It's like these guys are still like, no, get me out of college and get me my big money now. I could care less if I succeed. Do you see the numbers we're going to be making?